Hello and welcome to another video for Biblical Exegesis Practicum online for Life Pacific University. Today we're going to be talking about the word study, and so I'm going to walk you through some of the process of how to do a Hebrew word study for your narrative worksheet. So as you can see, we have our word study process here. It's the Hebrew Word Study Guide online. This is the basic word study process for English Bible readers. This was done by Jim W. Adams at Life Pacific University. If you follow this footnote, and just so you're aware, footnotes are important. So if you have footnotes, then you should always read them. Right. This was revised by me for this class. So this is a revised edition of Jim's word study process. So synchronic linguistics is where we're going to start. And notice we have another footnote there. So we go down here to the footnote number 3. Synchronic linguistics refers to when we study words from a language in a specific period. If we were to look at this word and kind of break it up into its origin, we would have soon or sin, which is a Greek preposition for with, and chronic, which would come from chronos, which means time. So this would be with time. So we're looking for a specific time period when we're doing synchronic linguistics. Okay. Later, we're going to talk about diachronic linguistics. Diachronic linguistics is through time. So that is how language can change. Okay. So we're going to find the Hebrew word. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to navigate to Bible Web App /study. And you can see I have an image here for you of what that's going to look like. This is just the upper portion of that. What we can do is we can look at the website itself here, right? So if you pull this up, this is BibleWebApp.com/study. Pull this up, it's probably going to land you on John. That's where it is most of the time when I pull it up. We're going to go up here, and let me just parallel these so that we can look both of them at the same time, okay? So we're going to go up here and we're going to put in 1 Samuel, okay? And specifically, we want to do 1 Samuel 15, right? That's the passage that we're in. So 1 Samuel 15. So you can see here Saul's disobedience. And you can see as I move my cursor, it highlights various words. Some of them it doesn't highlight. That's because there's not, for instance here, people is going to be a word that we would find in the Hebrew text, but his by itself is actually going to be a suffix on people. So we wouldn't be able to actually figure out what that Hebrew word is because there's not a distinct Hebrew word for his. There's only a distinct word here for people, and that people has a suffix for his. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to that website. We're going to select our passage by typing it in up here, which we've done. Then we're going to find the word that we're studying and we're going to click on it. Now here I've got Nacham that I've selected for you. Now Nacham is not the word that you're studying. You're studying Shema, but the example here I wanted to give you something else, and so I decided to do Nacham. So here we have in verse 11, regret. Now notice you can't select I. I is just going to be a part of the verb itself. There's not a separate word for I here. So we click on regret. And that brings up the Hebrew word nacham here. So this would be the spelling of the word in Hebrew. This would be our Strong's number, which will be helpful to you in looking it up in other books. And then we have the entire definition for it. Now, some of these words like nifal, pl, pual, and hithpael are going to be confusing to you. These are just ways that you say something in Hebrew. They're not quite tenses. They more indicate type of action. Okay, so nifal tends to be a passive sense, and so to be sorry, to suffer grief, to comfort oneself. PL tends to be a active as opposed to passive, and also tends to be intensive. And so this isn't to be comforted, but to comfort, right? And so that's how all of those work. Regardless, you don't need to know the definition of nifal, pual, pl, any of that kind of stuff. You just need to know the definitions in general, right? You need to look at how the word can be used, Okay, so that's one of the things that you're going to want to focus on here, right? So you're going to copy down the entire list of definitions given here. Now notice in the footnote of 5 here, we'd say that in a physical library, we would be completing this with Brown, Driver, and Briggs. And we'd also complete it with what's referred to as Halet, which is Hebrew Aramaic Lexicon of the Old Testament, and then also the more recent Dictionary of Classical Hebrew. Now, these are not really available for us online to be easily accessed, but if you were in a physical library, you'd be able to pull those out fairly easily. Okay, so I'm just trying to walk you through how to do this without being able to get to library resources. If you can get to library resources, all the better. Okay, so we're going to copy down all of this. That's what we would want to do, right? We want to make sure that we get all of that and we copy it, right? And then determine if the noun is or determinative term is a noun, adjective, verb, adverb, etc. Well, nacham is indicating an action here, to be sorry. So that would be a verb, right? Proceed through the entry and determine the range of meaning of the term and see if your particular verse is discussed. Well, in this specific version of the definition, you're not actually going to get that. If you were using Brown, Driver, and Briggs, you would see specific notations of, which verse has to be sorry, which verse has rue, which verse has to comfort oneself, that sort of thing. And we'll see that in a second. And notice that sometimes, the words that are used here in BDB is Brown, Driver, and Briggs. And that's what this is based off of. This is based off of Brown, Driver, and Briggs. Sometimes these words can be a little bit complicated. And so, for instance, you may not be particularly used to seeing the word rue. And so you may need to look that up if you're not 100% sure what that means. Okay. Then concordance. Within the pop-up window, we want to click on Find All Occurrences, okay? So when we click on that, it's going to open up a whole new window with a bar graph at the top, right? And gives us Nacham, Strong's number, and then it tells us all of the different ways that it's translated. It's translated as comfort 25 times, comforted 16 times, sorry 6 times, yada, 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 right? And if we scroll through here, it'll show us all the different ways that it's being translated. So we have this one will give us rest. And so give rest is what the translation of Nacham is in Genesis 5:29. What we want to do is examine the author's use and then examine the book's use. Now, in our instance, the reason I have those distinguished is when you're doing a word study, if you're studying something in Paul, for instance, Paul has a lot of letters, and so you want to see how Paul uses it in all of his letters, but then you also want to see how Paul uses it in the specific letter that you're studying. Now here, we're working off of 1 Samuel, and we're not 100% sure that 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel are written by the same person. It may be, it may not be, we're not sure. Okay, so we could probably just focus on the instances of this in 1 Samuel. Now you see here, 1 Samuel, we have regret, change his mind, and regretted. Those are our 3 uses in 1 Samuel. And if we click on 1 Samuel 15, we see 1 Samuel 15, regret is highlighted already. If we scroll down, we'll see that change mind is highlighted. If we keep scrolling down, we'll see regretted is highlighted. Okay. And so we want to be able to do that. We want to see how that's being used, right? Using the same window, we want to examine the concrete uses of this word. And so a concrete use of this word, if we look up here at the top and the way that this word tends to be used, what we want to do is try to figure out what is the literal use of this word. Is it to be sorry? Is it to console? Is it to repent, regret, comfort, or be comforted? And it seems like if someone were to say Nacham and mean it literally, then likely they mean probably something like comfort. Now, if we do a little bit more digging, which I'm not going to expect of you guys, if we do a little bit more digging, we'll see that the literal use of Nacham is actually to take a deep breath. And so, this sort of And you can see how that might lend itself to be sorry. Because if you're about to apologize, often you do what? You take a deep breath. I'm sorry. Right. Same thing with repent, same thing with comfort, same thing with be comforted. And so if we were to see an instance of nacham here where it's taking a deep breath, that would be a concrete use of the word. To the figurative uses of the word would be the rest of these, right? And so what we want to do is we want to try to figure out, like, how is this generally used? Now, you don't have to scroll through all of this to see all of the ways that it's used. You can actually just review this, right? You can review all of these here because that's what you've been given, right? Find all occurrences. You can review all of these and see basically how the scriptures use this. Then you want to look at your specific verses in this passage and examine several literal translations. These are going to be New American Standard, King James, ESV, that sort of thing. And then you want to gather the range of meaning of the term and assess its semantic field. In other words, how does this word get used? What are some of the ways that it gets used that surprised you? How do you think this should impact our perspective on the world and how it's used in our passage? Now, then we have our diachronic linguistics. Notice the diachronic linguistics is grayed out. I'm not expecting that you complete that. If you're really curious and you want to do that, you're welcome to, but you don't have easy access to theological dictionaries online, and so I'm not expecting that of you, okay? One thing that's worth noting here, though, is the etymological sense. Etymological sense is, if we were to say diachronic, dia in Greek means through, chronic means time. And so this would be through time, diachronic, right? And so that is the etymology of diachronic, is that it would mean through time. The question of whether it's being used in its etymological sense then is it being used to indicate through time, or is it indicating something else? That's what we mean when we say, is it being used in its etymological sense? The etymological sense of nacham would be to breathe, to take a deep breath. But anyway, like I said, you don't have to complete this part. I just want to explain that briefly. Structural linguistics, syntagmatic relationships. This pertains to syntax. This is basically how words are used together. And so what I want you to do here, just briefly, and you don't have to do this for every single occurrence, right? That would take an insane amount of time. You just need to do it with the word in our passage. Examine the word combinations the term occurs in. Is there a particular pattern of subject and verb and direct object, etc.? And so what we want to see is, if we were doing nacham, I regret that I have made Saul king. The glory of Israel will not allow or change his mind, for he is not a man that he should change his mind. And the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. So is there a repeated pattern? Well, there is sort of a repeated pattern. We have a regretting that God has made Saul king, and then we have a regretting that God has made Saul king. But then we also have right here in the middle Samuel saying that God doesn't regret. Or rather, God does not nacham. Now, what he means there is change mind, but it's the same word, right? So what influence do certain words have on the term? If it's a verb, is there a dominant subject, direct object? Do these concepts develop a figurative concept? I just want you to think through how the word is used in the sentence throughout the passage and see, is there some sort of consistent theme there that's been brought out? What I would say here with regard to Samuel is God regrets that he makes Saul king. And based on Saul's behavior, it seems like Saul sort of sees himself as the glory of Israel. And Saul has changed his mind several times. And so it seems like Samuel is saying the glory of Israel, i.e. Yahweh, not you, will not lie or change his mind. That's what you do. That's not what he does. For he is not a man like you that he should change his mind. Okay, I think that's what Samuel's trying to say here, and he's juxtaposing that against twice saying that the Lord regrets that he makes Saul king over Israel. And so we have this repetition of nacham, but there's an interruption of the way in which nacham is used. Remember the narrative devices of repetition and interruption. And so this is an interruption here to show us that this is what this word indicates. And then our conceptual analysis at the end. Draw together the term semantic field from the above study. This is sort of conclude all of your research. What do you think about the word based on all of your research thus far? And then determine if it develops a theological concept. How does it apply to humankind? How does it apply to God? How does it apply to the divine-human relationship? Do humans nacham? Yes. Does God nacham? Well, yeah. God nachams here and God nachams here, right? And then Samuel says that he doesn't here, right? And so we have this interesting juxtaposition. How does this term apply to the divine-human relationship? Well, I think the way that we should think about God changing his mind is that he will never change his mind towards wrath. He changes his mind towards grace. He doesn't change his mind towards judgment on us. He changes his mind in the direction of our benefit, right? He regrets that bad things have happened. He doesn't regret that good things have happened, right? And so that would be sort of a conceptual analysis here. So to give you a brief summary then of what I would like you to do with obey, just to point out some stuff here. Our first instance of obey, or Shema in Hebrew, happens right here at the beginning of 1 Samuel 15. And so you have all of the definitions here, right? And so you've got Hifil, PL, Nifal, and Cal. And then we're going to click on Find All Occurrences. Well, in Find All Occurrences, what we're going to see is that there are a lot of instances of Shema in this passage. And so what we want to do is we want to take careful inventory of how it is being used in this passage, because this repetition is helping us to understand what is happening in this passage. Okay, so again, when we go to our bar graph up here, we're going to find 1 Samuel in the bar graph. And so 1 Samuel, Shema occurs 59 times. So we click on that. It brings us down to 1 Samuel. And I should note, one of you emailed me and said that you were having a hard time getting the clicking in this website to work. If that's the case, you should switch your browser up. I'm using Chrome and it's working, but it seems like Chrome doesn't always work for everyone. And so maybe try Safari or try another web browser if you're having a hard time with that. Okay. So now notice we've got listen and summoned highlighted here. If we go up to the top here for Shema, all of the different ways that it gets translated, there are lots of different translations here, right? Lots of different translations. And so notice in our passage, we have listen, and then we have then Saul summoned the people. Well, so this probably means something like Saul listened to the people and then numbered them to lion. That's probably the indication here. We have a repetition of the same word. Saul is listening to them. And what's he been told? That the Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, listen to the words of the Lord. Well, the next time that Shema occurs, Saul is Shemaing the people, not Yahweh. So that is kind of a big deal, right? So we scroll down to the occurrences in 1 Samuel 15. There's 15:1, there's 15:4. And then further down, we have Samuel saying, but what then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of oxen which I hear? And then why then did you not obey? And obey here is just listen, right? Listen to the voice of the Lord. And then Saul says to Samuel, I did listen to the voice of the Lord and went on a mission on which the Lord sent me and have brought back King Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. This is literally the opposite of what was told him. And so he hasn't obeyed the voice of the Lord. He has explicitly disobeyed the voice of the Lord, right? And so, he says, we're going to hand over this stuff for sacrifice. And this is where you get the classic quote from this. Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying, shemaing listening to the voice of the Lord. Behold, to listen, to obey is better than to sacrifice and to heed than the fat of rams. And so then later, Saul says, because I feared the people and listened to their voice, right? And so he's saying that he's admitting the fact that, in fact, yes, he did shema the people. He did not shema Yahweh. And so this is repeated several times in our passage. Who are you shemaing? Right. This is how I would potentially preach this. Right. Who do you listen to? And so this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to look through the passage. I want you to think through, like, what is the, when we get to the concrete and figurative, what is the literal use of Shema? Well, the literal use of Shema would just be receiving a sound with your ears. That's what it literally means. The figurative use would be obeying, right? Did you listen to the Lord? Well, yes, I heard him. But if you didn't obey him, then did you really listen? Right? And you see the distinction there between concretely, literally, did you listen? Well, yes, I heard what he said. But there's a distinction between literally hearing and then figuratively obeying, right? Shema extends beyond just the action of the literal action of hearing to then what do you do with what you have heard? Are you obeying or not? Because if you do not obey, then you have not, in fact, shemad. Okay, and so that's the point here with this word study. Hopefully, as you continue through this, that will be helpful to you. If you have any questions with this, of course, please just let me know. Send me an email, and be happy to help you with this. I know that this is often not the easiest thing to do. So as always, I'm not expecting you to just knock this out of the park, but I do want to see some solid effort. So yeah, so let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next time.